The phrase arrived in 1963 in letters my father never sent. It took me 34 years to understand what it meant. Heaven has been trying to reach you all week. And before the next 7 days slip through your hands, I want you to sit with what that actually means, because you've felt it. The 3 a.m. waking when the house is at its quietest. The ringing in your ear no one else can hear. The goosebumps that come without any change in the air. Each time you brushed it aside, work, obligations, the list that never shortens. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's exactly the condition this message was made to meet. Pause. I want to say something plainly, because fear has disguised itself as spirituality for long enough. A final attempt isn't panic. It isn't punishment or abandonment. It's the close of something I'd call a temporal alignment cycle, a defined window in which a person is offered a clear, low-friction path forward. Scripture keeps returning to words like watch and window and hour because the people writing those words were describing something structural, not sentimental. When the psalmist wrote of the night watches, he wasn't reaching for a metaphor. He was pointing at a specific window, roughly 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., when the noise of ordinary life drops low enough for something else to come through. The ancient traditions built entire practices around this. Why that hour specifically? Why the deepest part of the night is when the signal gets through at all? I've never fully answered that. What I do know is this: time doesn't move the way we're trained to believe it does. Not in the places that matter. Sacred traditions across cultures describe cyclic windows. A door opens. A door closes. It doesn't stay open because you weren't ready. When a phase of life reaches its end, the structure holding it together begins to come apart. I've watched this happen. I've lived it. That feeling you carry right now, everything too heavy and somehow hollow at the same time, that's not random. That's a container reaching the end of what it was built to hold. And here's what I want you to really hear. During a threshold like this, something begins. A sequence. Not coincidence. Not imagination reaching for meaning. A deliberate escalation, moving through distinct phases. The first 3 days are quiet. Subtle. A high-frequency tone in the inner ear. The one you've been blaming on tinnitus, on the refrigerator, on your own pulse. Spontaneous goosebumps, as if something brushes against you from just inside the world. Waking in the middle of the night, 3:14, then 3:47, then 3:02. The times shift, the window doesn't. You're being contacted during the narrow stretch when the noise drops low enough for something to land, and you slept through it. Not because you're broken, because you've been living a life that takes more than it gives. When those quiet signals don't reach you, the broadcast shifts. The whisper becomes friction. Ordinary tasks start resisting in ways that don't make sense. Devices slow for no reason. Conversations drain you without cause. You stare at a spreadsheet you've filled out 100 times and can't track the numbers. You pick up your phone, set it down, pick it up again, without knowing why. This isn't malfunction, it's a deliberate slowing because you wouldn't slow yourself. When that doesn't work, something more direct happens. The ordinary momentum of your life gets interrupted. A cancellation. A delay. A door closing. Suddenly you're alone with yourself in a way you couldn't have arranged. That's when a more concentrated signal comes through. The teachers who trade in fear won't tell you this because it doesn't serve what they're selling. That direct interruption isn't a threat. It's closer to a rescue. I spent 4 years in a rented room in Leith after leaving the University of Edinburgh. 17 years of research in a cardboard box. I was convinced I'd been discarded, that whatever ordering force runs through things had no use for a man who'd failed so publicly. But the override had already happened. That room wasn't my punishment. It was the moment of quiet the signal had been waiting for. The moment it finally got through. Pause. Some people receive it in a single clean door closing. Others have to be brought completely still before they stop running. I keep coming back to that difference. Here's what 20 years moving through indigenous frameworks and esoteric traditions taught me about how this works. A cosmic gate doesn't close out of cruelty. It closes because of what the old texts call systemic harmonic integrity. A deep-sea vessel seals its airlocks not out of hatred for the ocean, but because surviving the descent requires a specific internal pressure. A spiritual threshold works the same way. Once the alignment passes, the entry point seals. Not because something was withheld from you. Because the integrity of where you're going depends on the seal. Missing the window isn't eternal ruin. Say that again slowly. Missing the window isn't abandonment, or curse, or loss. It means a longer wait, a holding pattern, while the cycle turns toward the next opening. Not punishment. A delay. The distance between those two things is the distance between a prison and a waiting room. What's happening right now, this final attempt, is an act of grace, a concentrated signal making sure you don't stay stranded in something that's already coming down around you. There's no anger in it. Think of it as someone knocking harder because they need you to hear them before it's too late. Pause. You're not being threatened. You're being handed coordinates. Now, the mechanism underneath all of this. The architecture of how this escalation actually works. There's something I haven't named yet, something I've held back until the moment felt right. Once you hear it, I think you'll recognize it as the thing that's been running beneath your entire week. It explains why the quiet signals land for some people and pass through others without touching them, why the friction feels different depending on what you were doing when it hit. And it answers something about the 3 a.m. window that I've never heard anyone put into words properly. Who's doing the broadcasting, and why they need you to receive it before this window closes. 4 years of deep isolation. Someone asked me whether the silence meant I'd failed. I asked myself the same question in the dark of a rented room in Leith, sitting among cardboard boxes full of the intellectual architecture of a man I no longer recognized. What I learned, what I'm still learning, is that silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's the sound of a perimeter locking into place. The question to carry out of this chapter isn't whether you're worthy of what's reaching you. The fact that it's reaching you at all already answered that. The question is simpler and harder. What were you doing in the 3 days when the signal was quiet, and what did it take before you were willing to stop? You already know. You've known it every time you woke at 3:00 a.m. and told yourself it was nothing. Your framework is coming apart. The descending frequency broadcasts are a high guidance architecture reaching for your conscious participation before the gateway closes. The window isn't closing because you failed. What you carry into it depends entirely on the integrity of the seal, and the seal is made from choices you don't remember making, in moments you dismissed as ordinary. You hold the first piece of the mechanism. The second piece, what the 7 days of interference actually did to your body and your relationships, gets much more personal, and somewhere beneath the exhaustion, you already know it was never random. And then the room got quiet, not the comfortable kind. The kind that made you check the silence for a pulse. You turned your attention back. To the caregiving. To the spreadsheet. To the conversation you were having with someone who hadn't asked you a single question about yourself in 3 years. And the moment you chose to stay there, that's when the broadcast had to change its approach. Pause. Esoteric warfare and bioenergetic field dynamics document the 7 days preceding a direct override as a period of intense atmospheric, physical, and interpersonal interference. They call it pre-elevation resonance friction. It's the friction generated when two timelines grind against each other, the one you're leaving and the one you're entering, and your body is the membrane caught between them. Here's what that friction actually felt like in the ordinary hours of your week. The lead blanket. You know the one. A heavy, bone-deep lethargy that arrives without warning, middle of the afternoon, nowhere near bedtime, completely indifferent to caffeine or how well you slept. It pinned you to your chair while obligations piled up around you. You blamed the weather, the food, the late night before. Some of you booked a blood test. The clinic found nothing. Then the fog. The inability to hold a simple calculation in your head for more than a few seconds. Words slipping mid-conversation, leaving you nodding at a sentence you'd already lost. The ordinary logistics of daily life, form filling, scheduling, small talk about the weather becoming suddenly unbearable. Not difficult. Unbearable. As if some part of your mind had quietly decided certain inputs weren't worth processing anymore and closed the door on them. And then the compression. A pressure in the upper abdomen, between the diaphragm and the solar plexus, that no posture adjustment could touch. You pressed on it with your fingers and found only tension. It sat there through meals, through sleep, through whatever parts of the day you could still function in. This is the energetic friction of unintegrated incoming light pressing against old survival patterns. It feels like something waiting. Here's a statistic that matters more than anyone has told you. In documented accounts of pre-elevation friction, roughly 7 out of 10 people report the lead blanket, the fog, and the abdominal pressure arriving in that exact sequence. What almost no one records is what happens when someone tries to resist that sequence, when they fight it rather than yield to it. The friction doesn't pause, it compounds. Each layer of resistance adds density to the next phase, until the compression stops feeling like a hand on your chest and starts feeling like a wall. Most people don't stay. They push harder. They reach for another coffee. They schedule more. They treat the resistance as a problem to be solved, and in doing so, they miss that the resistance was never the obstacle. It was the mechanism. Pause. Now the second layer. The one that happens outside your body. An uncalibrated social environment registers a sovereign vessel's imminent detachment before it can name what's happening. It can't see the timeline shift, but it feels the withdrawal, the way a room feels the pressure drop before a storm, and it responds with erratic behavior. Manufactured crises. The long-dormant friend who suddenly surfaces with a false emergency. The toxic family member whose text arrives at the exact moment you finally sat down to rest. The chaotic acquaintance who needs you to co-regulate them through a drama you were never part of. None of it coincidence. All of it pulling you back into low-frequency emotional caretaking, trying to reinstall you in the role they need you to play. Passive-aggressive boundary probing. The colleague who challenges your quietness, demands an explanation for your withdrawal. The peer who provokes a defensive argument over something trivial, trying to catch you off guard, trying to make you explain yourself. And then the systemic leaks. A financial statement you suddenly can't locate. A domestic repair that needs urgent attention right now. 3 small things surfacing simultaneously, each one scattering your focus a little further. 7 out of 10. Heaviness, fog, compression. Then the people. Then the leaks. All of it clustered in a single week, engineered, or at least it felt that way, to exhaust your vital energy before the gateway aligns. And here's what changes how you read this week. None of it was punishment. None of it was random. What you experienced in your body wasn't a malfunction. What you experienced in your relationships wasn't coincidence. Pre-elevation resonance friction isn't the universe being difficult. It's the universe being precise. There's a difference between a whisper and a shout. The first 3 days, The broadcast was subtle, designed for those whose attention was clear enough to receive it. The next 4 days, the friction escalated, designed for those whose attention had to be pulled inward by force. And the people around you? They processed your withdrawal the only way they know how. As a threat to the arrangement they'd built around you, the lead blanket pinned you down because stillness was the only way you would stop. The fog cut your focus because your focus was being spent on things that were never yours to carry. The compression sat in your solar plexus because the old survival patterns were fighting the incoming light, and the fight always happens in the body first. You are not broken. You are not failing. You've been absorbing the friction between two realities, the one falling apart behind you and the one still taking shape ahead, and your body has been doing exactly what it was built to do. The question was never what's wrong with you. The question is what the compression was making room for. Because those 7 days of interference weren't just a test of your attention, they were a diagnostic of your attachments. Every manufactured crisis showed you who was drawing from your energy. Every boundary probe showed you who believed they had a permanent claim on your access. Every leak showed you what your system was still wired to protect. And when it finally goes quiet, when the fog lifts and the heaviness passes and the crises stop coming, you'll need to know which of those attachments were feeding you and which ones were feeding on you. That distinction is the next door, and it doesn't open on its own. Pause. The third part of the mandate is called vessel containment, capacitas regales, the royal capacity. And I know it sounds passive. It isn't. It's actually the most active thing you will do through all of this, because before anything of real weight can land in your life, before the resources, before the right relationships, before the kind of authority that actually fits you, the vessel has to be able to hold it. You can't receive something that size inside a life that's fragmented and overextended and leaking from every edge. The mandate is direct. Quarantine your time. Quarantine your physical space. Quarantine your nervous system. Clear what doesn't belong on your calendar. Build a space in your home that holds. This isn't advice about reorganizing your schedule. It's a structural instruction for a vessel that is about to be filled past its current capacity. Think about what happens when you pour something into a container with cracks in it. The liquid doesn't just fill the cracks. The cracks widen. The container loses whatever integrity it had left. The overgiving was a crack. The open doors were a crack. The overextended, chaotic schedule, that was a crack too. None of it can stay if the vessel is going to hold what's coming. Quarantine isn't punishment. It's not isolation. It's the deliberate, temporary removal of the vessel from the environment that was compromising it, so that what gets poured in actually has somewhere to stay. So when you ask what the mandate is really saying, here's what it's saying. Everything you've been through, the exhaustion, the fog, the compression, the crises, the probes, the leaks, all of it was clearing the path for this. The diagnostic wasn't the destination. It was the preparation. The interference wasn't the obstacle. It was the mechanism, the thing that named your attachments so they could be released. And now that they've been named, the mandate has been issued. 3 orders, 3 seals, the cessation, the boundary lock, the containment, and they all point toward the same thing. You are being prepared for an expansion your current architecture couldn't survive. The mandate isn't asking you to become someone different. It's asking you to stop being the person who held the cracks together so the vessel, finally unburdened, can become what it was always meant to hold. The cessation of giving is going to feel like betrayal to the people who have been receiving from you. That's not your problem to carry. That's the diagnostic delivering its final finding. The boundary lock is going to feel like abandonment to the people who assumed they had permanent access. That's not your failure. That's the seal closing exactly where it needed to close. And these three seals together, cessation, boundary lock, containment, aren't three separate acts of deprivation. They're one unified instruction delivered across three dimensions: your output, your access points, your environment. Remove one seal and the other two won't hold. Pause. There's one more part of the mandate that hasn't been spoken yet. Three orders are visible, but there's a fourth instruction living underneath all of them, the standing command that makes the other three possible. It's not a task. It's not a protocol. It's a posture. And without it, the cessation curdles into resentment. The boundary lock hardens into bitterness. The containment becomes its own kind of prison. The fourth order is stillness, not the absence of motion, the presence of complete receptivity. The kind where you stop trying to solve the next 10 steps. Your jaw unclenches. Your shoulders drop. Your mind stops reaching forward. And in that stillness, the mandate finishes its work. The seals hold. The vessel is ready. The expansion can begin, but here's what you need to know about the moment the mandate completes. It won't announce itself. No dramatic shift in your circumstances. No fanfare. It will arrive as a sensation in your body, a deep, involuntary release in your diaphragm. A breath that actually drops into your lungs for the first time in months. A warmth that spreads down your spine, slow and even. That sensation is the first sign the transmission was received. Pause. The quiet that follows a 48-hour integration isn't empty. When the fog finally lifts, you'll notice something strange: the absence of urgency. For weeks, maybe longer, your nervous system has been braced, waiting for the next blow, the next demand, the next thing that needs handling right now. And then, nothing. No crisis at the door, no voice rehearsing a conversation that never happens. Just a wide, still silence where all that noise used to be. That silence is the first proof the mandate finished transmitting. And what comes after isn't the end of the process. It's where the confirmation begins. It arrives in 4 parts. The first is somatic. The breath I described will be followed by a drop in your heart rate. Not gradual. Almost immediate, like something reached in and turned down a dial that had been running too fast for years. Your jaw will unclench on its own. You'll feel it happen, the muscles in your face softening without any effort from you. Your teeth separating, the back of your neck releasing a tension so old you'd stopped registering it as tension at all. And there'll be warmth. A warmth that spreads down your spine, slow and even, steady, unmistakable. This is your body recognizing that the threat has passed, not because you decided to relax, because the transmission was received, and your body knows it before your mind catches up. The second signpost feels like a door opening somewhere in your mind. All week you've been moving through fog, that heavy, muffled quality where even simple things felt like pushing through water. When this transmission lands, that fog doesn't slowly thin out. It lifts, all at once, like a window swings open and stale air rushes out in a single breath. Your thinking becomes clear, quiet, sharp in a way that isn't forced. Not because you found some answer, but because whatever was blocking it has been moved. The pressure behind your eyes releases. The tightness you've been carrying at your temples, gone. Just like that. The third signpost won't be something you feel in your body. You'll notice it in the world around you. Within 24 hours of the transmission settling in, the manufactured chaos stops. The calls that always seemed to need something from you. The false emergencies. The people who had a way of pulling you back into their spiral, they go quiet, not because their lives suddenly got easier, but because the protection that locked around you is doing what it was built to do. From where you're standing, it will simply look like the world calmed down. That calm is the confirmation. It's the seal holding. the fourth signpost will find you whether you're paying attention or not. It's numeric. In the 48 hours that follow, you'll keep seeing the same two sequences. The first is 1010 on a clock, a receipt, a screen you weren't even focusing on. The second is 444. It'll show up once and you'll notice it. Then again. Then a third time, and you won't be able to write it off anymore. 1010 marks the closing of the old cycle and the opening of what comes next. 444 is the confirmation that the protection around you is locked and active, not isolation, insulation. These aren't decorations, they're the final part of what was sent to you. The way the transmission signs itself. Before I close, I want to take something apart because I know what this kind of language can do to a careful, skeptical mind. I've been that person. I've sat in rooms where talk like this would have been dismissed without a second thought. So I want to say this plainly. The phrase you've been hearing around this transmission, final attempt, is not a threat. It's not punishment. It's not some force losing patience with you. Final doesn't mean last chance before things fall apart. It means the cycle is completing, the window is closing. And because ordinary life drowned out the quieter signals that came before, what you're receiving now is the emergency frequency, the most direct route, because the softer ones didn't reach you in time. So here's what your week actually was. The disruptions weren't random. They weren't a malfunction, they were dampeners. Pause, deliberate, engineered. Built into the same architecture that sent this transmission, designed for one purpose, to slow you down, to make it impossible to keep moving at the pace you were running. They didn't slow you to harm you. They slowed you to position you. To bring you to exactly the coordinates where the direct transmission could reach you. The fourth order has been underneath the other three this whole time, and now it's the only one that remains. Stop striving. I'm not asking you to map out the next 10 steps. Those steps already exist. They're built into the same architecture that opened this window, and they'll become visible in the order they need to. What's being asked of you is simpler than that. Stop reaching. Sit in the quiet. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. The mandate does not require your effort here, it requires your absence of resistance. And in that absence, the mandate does the rest. The seals hold. The vessel is ready. The code is integrating now. Let it. Don't meet it with analysis while it's landing. It isn't a theory to turn over in your mind, it's a frequency, and what arrives in stillness doesn't make an announcement, it settles. And the settling is the work completing. You'll know it has landed. Not because the phone rings with a solution, not because everything shifts overnight. You'll know because of the 4 confirmations. The breath that finally drops, the fog that lifts clean, the crises that simply go quiet. And the numbers that keep showing up until you stop dismissing them. When the first of those signs appears, you don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to respond. The confirmation isn't for anyone else. It's for you. You have been reached. The cycle is closing. Pause. Sit still. Let it land.